Nyhetsveckan med Ingrid och Maria.
Hi everybody, welcome to another special edition of Nyhetsveckan, Newsweek special number 34. My name is Maria Selander and with me as always my colleague Ingrid Karlqvist.
Hello, hello.
Today, Ingrid, we have a very special guest, Mr. Gonzalo Lira. Welcome to the show, Gonzalo.
Thank you very much for having me on, ladies. It's a real pleasure. And hello to everyone in Sweden listening to the broadcast. I hope you enjoy it.
Could you be so kind as to give our audience a short introduction as to who you are and your background, and also tell us where you are at this moment in time and why?
Sure. I live in Kharkiv, Ukraine. And right now it's the middle of the siege of Kharkiv by Russian troops. I live here because my wife is from this region, and we have two small children, but they are no longer here. They're in the West, and I'm staying here to see this war through, to see how it goes. I am a writer by trade. I studied history and philosophy in university, and I worked in Hollywood in the late 90s, and then wrote some novels that were published by major publishers. And then from there, I just moved on to different businesses and just exploring different things in life, you know. And this war has been quite the experience. My family is from Chile, and I know in Sweden you all have a lot of experience with Chileans, and that is something that we in Chile talk about quite a bit, to tell you the truth, and we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and,
because that is so interesting. You actually did a couple of years ago, but someone put it out just a week ago or so. You did video about Sweden, and you were really upset about Swedish politicians calling our country a humanitarian superpower. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think that you see, the Christian value of charity, it seems to me, is a very important value, but you should never fall for the sin of pride insofar as your altruism is concerned. And it's always struck me, and I don't mean any disrespect to you, kind ladies, but it's always struck me that Sweden tends to view altruism through a lens of pride and hubris. Because what happened is that in Chile, in 1973, there was a coup d'etat against the Salvador Allende regime. That was a Maoist Leninist regime that was intent on persecuting people and frankly liquidating them in a very nasty way. And anyway, they were overthrown. The Allende regime was overthrown by the dictator Augusto Pinochet and the military at the time. And Sweden at that time in 1973, through the Swedish consulate or embassy, I forget which one, they put out a statement that they would accept all Chilean political refugees and they would transfer them to Sweden. And what happened was, and we in Chile were shocked by this, because what happened was that there were some political dissidents who took Sweden up on their offer, but there were a great number of criminal elements, quite frankly, who took up Sweden's offer. And all of a sudden, we saw from afar, of course, how Sweden had imported a criminal underclass. And of course, the Pinochet regime made no effort whatsoever to stop Sweden. On the contrary, because, you know, someone else's loss is their gain. And it struck us that Sweden, in its very understandable desire to, quote, do the right thing and help people, had created a situation for itself that would find very, very much to its detriment. Now, what has happened to us in Chile is that whenever we talk about Sweden, we are at once amused and embarrassed, because we know that in Sweden, Chileans have a very, very bad reputation because of this criminal underclass that was imported into Sweden. And so, whenever any Chilean who is not a criminal, is just a regular businessman or tourist, goes to Sweden, they're always looked askance in Sweden. And we know this, we're perfectly aware of it. And we're embarrassed by it, sure, but at the same time, we find it very funny, because Sweden created this problem for itself, which, as I understand it, this Chilean criminal underclass has caused considerable headaches to Sweden over the years, over the decades. And in the early 2010s and onward, Sweden decided to import an enormous number of migrants. And they really weren't political refugees. They were really economic migrants from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. And it seems from afar that this has created enormous problems for Sweden, whereas I understand it, 1 in 10 people in Sweden are these migrants, and they cause a great deal of problems. I mean, here in Ukraine, we're getting reports that Ukrainian women with small children were harassed by some Somalis who were trying to break in and potentially sexually assault these women and children. And it's just horrifying. And we in Chile, at least, and perhaps in other countries, we ask you, what were you guys thinking? I'm not saying this I understand the concept of trying to help your neighbor, of trying to help others less fortunate. But there comes a moment when helping others is to your detriment, to your serious detriment. And so that's why I suppose, and I know that this is not just limited to people from Chile. There are people from other countries who also express concern and confusion as to why Sweden consistently seems to, in the name of helping others, which is, like I said, a wonderful thought, a something to be proud, something to aspire to help others. But in the name of helping others, you are deliberately harming yourselves and creating a permanent problem for yourself. But that's what it looks like from the outside.
Well, why do you think the Swedes do this? I mean, you called it the arrogance of altruism. What's the thinking behind this? Is it some kind of, we call it Titanic nationalism sometimes, well, where you think you're so arrogant and you think that you can do anything. We are so great, we can help anyone, no matter how many they are, no matter where they come from. Sweden is so great, we can handle anything. Is that your thinking regarding the reasoning behind this?
Yeah, well, it seems several things. Now, I've never lived in Sweden. I've never even been to Sweden. The closest I've been to Sweden is Copenhagen, so that doesn't count. Okay. But from what I understand from the outside, I understand that you in Sweden have a term called the tunnel or the hallway or something like that, the acceptable range of opinion.
The opinion tunnel.
The opinion corridor.
Corridor, yeah.
The corridor, yes, correct, yes. And it seems that is a very dangerous thing. Because when you have a reduced window of acceptable opinion, it's very easy for that reduced window to be manipulated in different directions and to label anything outside of that window simply unacceptable and you cannot consider it. And people, for different reasons, will move that window, especially if it's a very narrow window. In English, in American English, it's called the Overton window, the range of acceptable opinion. And it seems that Sweden has a very narrow corridor, you call it, opinion corridor. Yeah. And so that I think is a serious problem. I think also, and I don't mean any disrespect to you ladies or your audience, but it's arrogance. It's arrogance to think that you are so superior that you can come down from heaven and solve everybody else's problems.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what Maria was
from home.
Yeah, and that's what Maria was calling the Titanic nationalism. It's like this. we always say that we are not nationalists. No, we're not. But deep inside, we are very, very nationalist. We actually know that Sweden is the best country in the world. But if you know that, if you know you're the best, you're not supposed to brag. So therefore, we pretend that, no, this country is nothing. But deep inside, we get very upset when the people who come here don't understand that we are the best country in the world. So, but let me tell you, the Swedish people never wanted this mass immigration. And it's actually now 30% of the population that have some kind of foreign background in the country that used to be the most homogeneous in Europe. So this is a huge change for us. And finally, now people are waking up, but we never wanted it, but they never let us have anything to say about it, because all the political parties, they wanted this. Even the conservatives, which is so stupid because the social democrats are actually been importing people to vote for them. That's what they started with in 1973 with the Chileans. And now they bring on people from, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Afghanistan. It's crazy. They will never fit into our society.
No, and also, well, you have also other problems that are going on. First of all, you have imported the psychosis of the Americans insofar as minority populations, and this has happened across Europe. That you are unwilling to accept the fact that different people from different races and different cultures are going to think and act differently and have radically different priorities. You are just, because it's an American problem. Because of the issue of slavery and the Black population in the United States. And so you have that psychosis of insisting that you want to have a melting pot where this foreign population is melted into, is blended into your local culture. And especially the people that you have been importing have radically different cultures. Like I said with the Chileans, okay, I am Chilean, all right? And so I am telling you, the people that you imported, the vast majority of them, not all, but the vast majority of them were criminals. The crime rate in Chile dropped because of this policy, and they weren't that many, but they were enough to change the criminal. The net. Hello.
Yeah. Hello. You disappeared for a moment, but you're back.
No, somebody is sorry, am I there? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. No, like I was saying, the crime rates fell in Chile because of this situation. Okay. And so it is like sorry, I lost a little bit my train of thought because of something that happened here, but it's no big deal.
Yeah.
And so the issue becomes how do you solve this? How do you fix this problem? Go ahead.
I don't know how you fix this problem, but do you think there could be some kind of, plan behind all this? I mean, the thing you're talking about now, the various minorities, and could there be some kind of idea that someone or some people want to turn various minorities against each other, or men against women, blacks against white, straight people against gay people, and so forth, because of the old, divide and conquer thing?
Yeah, no, I don't think that it's any premeditated plan like a grand conspiracy, okay? Because grand conspiracies never work. What happens is that multiple groups of people find advantage in a particular policy. For instance, you were talking about the various political parties that got electoral advantage by importing foreign populations who would vote for them. So they obviously have a rationale for this. And then there are other people who would also want to import foreign people because they get cheaper labor. And so, the upper classes, which, the upper classes, the industrial classes, the capitalist classes, that is conservative party donors, would be happy to import cheap labor from Somalia, from the Middle East, from wherever. And so they push for mass immigration as well, along with the left-wing parties, because it benefits them as well.
Right.
Now, you do have to keep in mind that feminism is a capitalist project. It is a project deliberately designed from the get-go, from the 1960s, to drive down the price of labor, especially in those value-added businesses, those brain-intensive businesses.
Right.
Because a woman and a man physically are going to be different. You will never find a woman who works on an oil field as a field engineer on an oil well. You will never, or you will rarely find a woman who's a bricklayer,
Right.
or who is a sanitation worker, because it is physically demanding.
Mm.
But you will find lots of women who are lawyers, lots of women who are doctors, lots of women who specialize in those professions that demand brain power, because nobody's claiming that women are less intelligent than men. They're equally intelligent. And that's the thing, that's the advantage. And so the capitalists encourage women to join the workforce because it drives down the price of labor.
Yeah.
And so, especially in those expensive professions like the law, like medicine, like accountancy, those expensive professions, I mean, because a sanitation worker, you're not paying him that much. Let's just pause it for the sake of argument. You're paying him 20, 30 euros an hour, yeah, or less perhaps. Frankly, I don't know what the wages of such a worker are. But a lawyer who's charging 200, 300 euros per hour or more, well, then it's worthwhile to try to encourage women to go to law school. And here's the problem: it's that for women, they are miserable. That's the bottom line issue. They're absolutely miserable, because it is very exciting and very fulfilling when they're in their early 20s and their mid 20s. But then they get to their late 20s and into their early 30s, and they discover that they do not have children. They do not have a family of their own. And women, we like it or not, by evolution or by God, you don't have to go on either side of the divide on the issue of God, whether because God designed it this way or evolution designed it this way or evolved it this way. Women want to have strong emotional bonds with the people in their lives. They need that. They need that existentially. And since they don't have it because a company, a law firm, a hospital, a whatever, is never going to give that kind of emotional sustenance to a woman, but a family of her own will, all of a sudden she's in her early 30s, her mid 30s, her late 30s, 40s, 50s, no family, and completely miserable, living on a steady diet of antidepressant pills because she is dying inside, because she has none of those necessary strong emotional connections that a woman who decided to forego a career has when she has children of her own with a family of her own. And
you are absolutely right, Gonzalo. And we will not argue with you about it. We totally share your opinions on this. We always try to tell young women to have a family before it's too late. And my daughter, the daughter of my heart, she's not really mine because I could never have any children, but she came into my life when she was 4 or 5, and she's the daughter of my heart. I always tell her she's 26 years old and she's waiting for her second child right now. So I'm so happy.
Yes. And what happens is that she's probably far more fulfilled and happy than a woman who is 26 and has nothing but a career.
Yeah,
right. Because it's very obvious, a career will never smile at you. A career will never, give you a little hug. Okay, and it sounds trivial. And if you ask most parents on any given day are kind of sick and tired of the kids because they're annoying. I have small children, so I know what I'm talking about, right? But the thing is, the momentary dissatisfaction is nothing compared to the long-term satisfaction and happiness that a family of one's own gives.
Yeah.
And of course, this all goes from long before, from industrialization. I mean, we can really go back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution that fomented the notion of separating oneself from one's familial unit, from the not just the nuclear family, but the extended family and the long-term extended relationships with other families that one would have in like a small village or town, which are so essential. And in Latin America, we're fortunate enough to enjoy such relationships still up to a certain extent because of various historical reasons that aren't relevant for this conversation. But the point is, in so much of Europe and certainly in the United States, people move away from their hometown or where they were born, and they go to some strange place because of work or because of education, because of the university they have to go to. And after that university, the job that will hire them away in some other city. And so what happens is that they don't have that deep-rooted connection to the people around them. And so they feel disconnected, alienated, like a little jellyfish floating through the sea, and terrified, because living such an existence is extremely stressful. It is stressful to not feel that you have people who know you around you, looking after you, if only passively, you know? When you live in a small town where everybody knows who you are, everybody knows that you're the child of so-and-so and that you're the parent of so-and-so and, you know, the sibling of these people here and there and the best friend of that other fellow over there. When people know you like that in some small town, you feel very secure because you feel that the environment, the social environment you are in, you belong, and they are giving you a sense of collective security, a collective security, not in the great geopolitical sense, but the collective security of human beings, of a feeling that you belong and that the people around you will look after you if you ever get ill or injured or anything befalls you. And that sense that we have lost in modernity, because we've gained certain advantages of industrialization and modernity that is indisputable, but we have lost so much insofar as human connections is concerned. That's the problem, it seems to me.
I think you're absolutely right, Gonzalo. And what I am seeing, and what we have been seeing very clearly, I think, over the last few years, is that people who are atomized in this way are very easy to control and very easy to psyop in various ways. And now segueing into the whole Ukraine situation, I want to talk about this because what we are seeing here in the West is I have never seen media reporting that is so incredibly biased as the one we are seeing now. And I have never seen people so absolutely hypnotized by this reporting. I mean, these are people who are normally dissidents who are used to questioning everything, who are very doubtful about the whole COVID-19 narrative. They are now completely convinced that Putin is a raging maniac and that Zelensky is God or Batman or something. And I want to start off this Ukraine discussion by asking you, first of all, what are you seeing on the ground? You are in Kharkiv, I think, at the moment.
Yes, in Kharkov. Yeah, Kharkov in eastern Ukraine. Yeah. And well, the Russians are sieging the city and they're winning. And I know that they're winning because they're getting closer every day. Yeah. I can hear the shelling getting closer every day. And I'm sure that during this conversation, you'll hear a bit of the shelling. It's no big deal. It's far enough away. It's at least 7 kilometers from here. But even at 7 kilometers, 7 to 10 kilometers from here, you can hear it. Okay, it's quite loud. Right. So the issue is that Zelensky is a puppet of, he was originally created, because he is a creation, by a man called Ihor Kolomoisky, who is a Ukrainian-Israeli Cypriot oligarch. He is an engineer by trade, and a very smart man. I mean, none of these oligarchs are stupid. They're all very clever and very cunning. And Kolomoisky created the television show Servant of the People in 2015, and hired Zelensky to play the role of a president who was pro-EU and pro-NATO. And from the television show, which was artificially propped up because Kolomoisky owns 1+1 Media, which is the largest media firm and owns television stations here, and which, of course, aired this show. And through various means of publicity, stunts, and whatnot, they propped up this show artificially to make it extremely popular. And from there, they transitioned, Zelensky from being a TV character into being an actual political candidate. Crazy as that may sound.
You can't make this shit up. It's absolutely crazy.
No.
Do you think that
exactly.
Kolomoisky planned this all along? That's why he made that show, that he had his plans for Zelensky all along?
Oh, yes. No question.
Yeah.
His goal from the very get-go was to install his puppet president and to push for Ukraine to join the EU and and NATO. And in the United States, the person most responsible for having Ukraine join NATO and the EU and pushing all this was a woman named Victoria Nuland.
Yeah.
Now, Victoria Nuland is the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, and she, back in 2014, was the person who was in charge of engineering the coup d'etat that overthrew the legitimate government of Ukraine, of Yanukovych, and installing pulling off the Maidan Revolution. Now, the Maidan Revolution was based on, it was a color revolution. A color revolution, what does that mean? It's a revolution that's engineered by foreign powers, usually the United States, or actually exclusively the United States. And the way they do that is that they use non-governmental organizations that are privately funded, but all of those funds come from actually very few sources, and they're all working in concert with American intelligence services. Back in 1997, some observers were saying how the NGOs were basically contractors working for the CIA to carry out the objectives of the CIA, the programs of the CIA, that before the CIA did itself, but it turned out that for political reasons and practical reasons, it was better to hire it out to a contracting firm, to an NGO. And so that's what these NGOs are. They are ultimately American intelligence and American State Department officials. And they carried out this color revolution, and they used neo-Nazi thugs. I'm not kidding. And the person who financed these neo-Nazi thugs was Kolomoisky. I'm not kidding. It sounds insane that a Jewish oligarch would finance neo-Nazis, but that's the kind of world we're living in,
Yeah.
And because at the end of the day, I figured that he thought, muscle is muscle. It doesn't matter if they're Nazis, so long as they, crack the heads of the people that I want to crack, I suppose was his thinking. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the Azov Battalion, the Aran Battalion, the S-14, the Right Sector, all of these various neo-Nazi groups, and they are neo-Nazis, right? They're not like pretend neo-Nazis, and they're not like, how in the West we call J.K. Rowling a Nazi because she doesn't agree with the whole transgender ideology. No. These are actual Nazis with swastika tattoos and black sun tattoos. And, they do the whole Sig Heil thing. And yeah, they're real. They're for real. Okay. And so anyway, these people were they were the shock troops of the 2014 coup d'etat. And after the coup d'etat, they were allegedly dissolved. But what happened was that they were dissolved and absorbed into the national militia and the Ukrainian armed forces. And so what has happened is that the regime has been propped up by the money of Kolomoisky and by these neo-Nazi fascists. And they are real Nazi fascists. Do keep in mind, I am a conservative. I don't throw around the term neo-Nazi or fascist casually, okay? No. I am a very hard right conservative, but these people are animals. These people are true neo-Nazi fascist thugs. I mean, these are not SS. These are brown shirts. That's what they are. They are Eric Romer brown shirts. Okay.
But the most crazy thing about all this, Gonzalo, the most crazy thing is that the big newspapers, even the New York Times and all the Western media wrote up until this war started that they had so many problems in Ukraine with Nazis and with corruption and blah, 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 blah. And now everything of this is gone. They don't report anything about it.
Yeah. And that shows that, these news organizations are completely corrupt. I mean, you can't take them seriously at all. And anybody who does is just signing up to listen to propaganda.
Right. The system pigs, Gonzalo.
The system pigs, exactly right. I so despise them,
Me too.
Go ahead.
We agree with you. You did a video about this the other day where you completely blew the mainstream media to smithereens. And we agree with your analysis that they are many of them are highly corrupt people. So, but still,
yeah, because you mentioned that you both had been in the mainstream media in Sweden,
yes.
Yep.
and that you had left. Could you please tell me about that? I'm very interested in that.
It was around 2010, I think, Ingrid. We started to I mean, we had a bad feeling about where things were going since I started journalism school in 1996. Ingrid started in 1980, but after 2000 sometime, something shifted. Something in the media felt very different, and Ingrid and I both had a very uneasy feeling that we were asked to report, not to report the truth, but to hide it in more and more. And so finally we both quit and started doing alt media instead. So, and I'm very glad we did today, because I couldn't live with myself if I had a job that meant that I had to report lies every day. So
the thing is that we started to freelance like in the year 2000. So we were not on the mainstream media newsrooms for 10 years. And then we came back. I came back in 2010 to the biggest newspaper in Sweden, in Stockholm, and I worked at the night shift there. And then I saw the reporters being given jobs by the bosses, and they told them what the headline was supposed to be. They told them that you must call these and these and these people, and they were supposed to say this and this and that. And I saw the reporter coming back and saying, well, they didn't say those things. There is a totally different story. No. You have to call 10 more people until you get someone who says what we want them to say. And I was just, this is not journalism. This is not what I want to do. So that's why
it's propaganda.
Yeah. Of course.
What do you ladies think happened? I'm very curious about this, because other people are reporting more or less the same thing. And so I'm wondering what happened, you think, in those years?
I think in many respects, it's an issue of money, like so many other things. The mainstream media started really running out of money because people were getting the news for free on the internet and so on. And so the newspapers weren't really that important anymore. They weren't selling any, they weren't getting any ad revenue anymore. And so they had to really news of the world, go in that direction, news of the world, make everything really sensational and polarize things for profit. I think that was an important factor, because nobody's going to click on an article that seems balanced and fair, but not all that interesting. But the sensational stuff sells. So therefore, I think that was an important factor. But also the concentration of ownership in the media has been a factor. There are like 6 companies in the US who own everything, control everything.
Yes.
And there are political aspects of this, of course. The owners want to drive, the news in a certain direction, and they want to portray things in a certain light to achieve their goals.
It seems, I know that in the late 1980s, in the New York Times, the New York Times started thinking consciously that it was dictating what was important insofar as the national news was concerned. The editors-in-chief at the time started saying openly in their morning editorial meetings, they would say, we give the narrative for the nation. So what are the important stories that the nation ought to know about today? Which is a very paternalistic way of looking at it, as opposed to waiting for the news to percolate so that you would realize, oh, this is important and that's important. But it was sort of like an on-high, top-down approach to what were the topics that were important. But from there, it seems that during the 90s and especially into the 2000s and the 2010s, it became, manipulating the news outright. And what's going on now? It's just propaganda. It's not even reality. It's just. And what's really interesting is that they talk about what's going on in Ukraine, and they are completely wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. Like for instance, there was a story or these tweets of people insisting that one of the big problems for the Russians was frostbite.
Yeah.
I'm here. We're having lovely spring weather. Yeah, and you are in Sweden, and so that you're used to the cold. Mm-hmm. And here it's been the temperature is today. It's a lovely sunny day, and actually for the last week it's been really beautiful here. And the temperature has hovered around at 0 degrees. Sometimes it floats up to +3 degrees Celsius. Nobody's getting frostbite.
Right. Right.
I come from Chile, right, and I'm not getting frostbite. I'm perfectly fine. I can wander around for hours on end without any gloves, and I'm perfectly fine. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about when you say that the Russian soldiers are collapsing because of frostbite?
Yeah, I was thinking this morning when I read all those, the news from Ukraine, little pieces, and it's just like Russia is failing. They are losing the war. They are getting frostbites. They don't have food or ammunition or whatever. And I thought to myself, what are they going to write when Russia wins this war? What do you think? How are they going to back out of all this?
Yeah. And also the thing is, see, the war is coming to a conclusion. Because what has happened is that for your listeners to understand the situation, first of all, you have to understand that the Ukrainians were about to invade the Donbas region. That's what triggered this invasion by the Russians. And the Russians were perfectly aware of this. And that's why all of a sudden there was all this negotiation and flying around and all the rest of it. Because the Ukrainians were amassing their soldiers on the contact line, that is the division line between Ukraine and the breakaway republics. And they were planning on running a lightning fast 1 to 2 day invasion of the Donbas area, the breakaway republics, which are quite small, by the way. And they were planning on taking it over. And so they had amassed a huge army in the east. And what happened was that the Russians beat them to the punch, quite simply. And that's what it was. Because the Ukrainians were going to launch this invasion in mid-March. And what happened was that the Russians, they had some soldiers on the border, but what they did is that they rapidly escalated the number of soldiers because they had that ability. And they essentially hit the Ukrainians first and hit them a lot of times where the Ukrainians weren't. And so this created a lot of disorganization in the Ukrainian armed forces. And from there, the Russians very systematically destroyed the command and control structure of the Ukrainian armed forces. And so what has happened now is that the Ukrainian armed forces do not have a unified defense posture. They are basically broken up into various pockets. There's the Kiev pocket, the Kharkiv pocket, the Mariupol pocket, and most important of all, the Kramatorsk pocket, which is in eastern Ukraine. Now, around Kramatorsk, the town city of Kramatorsk, you have about 60,000 Ukrainian fighters. Now, do keep in mind, in any army, there are, support personnel and fighters. That's the big dividing line. And these, the fighters of Ukraine, those 60,000, that's basically the cream of the Ukrainian crop insofar as fighters are concerned. And they are being surrounded. And some pockets of these fighters are being annihilated as we speak. And that's the most important area of this war at this time. And these, this main grouping of the Ukrainian army, which is in the east, it has run out of fuel. It is running out of supplies, running out of ammunition even, and they have no possibility of any sort of relief. They're going to collapse. It's going to take a while, of course, but the Russians are patient because the Russians are winning, okay? And insofar as Kiev is concerned, the Russians are not going to invade. I mean, I would be very surprised if they decided to invade the city, of stage an assault and go into the city and try to take it over. I think that their plan is to simply wait, to patiently wait and let Kiev fall on its own. I think that they plan on taking Kharkiv, and they're close to it, because the army here in Kharkiv is rapidly running out of options. And in my own case, the word I'm getting at this juncture here, a local word, is that it might be the case that, well, I don't want to speak out of hand and I don't want to jinx it, but things might be going the Russians' way. Let's leave it at that in Kharkiv. But the point is, the Russians are decisively winning, and there's simply no way for the Zelensky regime to salvage the situation unless they can pull in NATO. And that window is closing, because you do have to keep in mind, if NATO decided to go into this war, it would take quite a while for them to stage the necessary men and materiel. Okay. Yeah. And they are already kind of staging those men and that materiel, but it's not enough. And the Russians have an advantage, a numerical advantage. And also they have home field advantage. And they also have the advantage of having a very, very sophisticated air defense systems that are far more sophisticated than anything that Saddam Hussein or Assad had, or any other regime has. Mm-hmm. And so if the Americans try to impose a no-fly zone, as they keep insisting idiotically, they will be blown out of the skies by the Russians, because establishing air dominance against the Russians, no, come on, no, that's not going to happen, not realistically. Okay, and the other thing, the final thing, is that the use what I said from the very beginning, and I have to say, I told you so. I said from the very beginning that the Russians were going to be using up their cheapest and oldest weapons, and they were, in a very real sense, going to be using their least experienced men as kind of like cannon fodder, and to hold back their best reserves, which is what they have done. And a couple of days ago, they unleashed for the first time in any military context, a hypersonic missile was fired. Yeah, and it was devastating. It scared NATO very badly, and they've gone out of their way to say, "Oh no, it was no big deal. It's just a fast rocket. It's no big deal," but it scared them, because they claim that they saw it coming. Although that claim is suspicious, but what is indisputable is that even if they saw it coming, they have no technology to stop it. They have, and it's so fast that there's no way to move out of the way before it hits. Okay, right. And it's basically a weapon designed to kill aircraft carriers. And the Russians used it very deliberately to send a message. And the message is, we will kill your carriers. We will kill your air bases. We have the power to do that. Don't mess with us. Right. And I think that that NATO hopefully gets the message, because the Russians will use such weapons and it will be devastating.
Right. That was my next question, actually. What do you think is going to happen next? And how is this war going to end?
The war is going to end one way or another with Russia winning.
Right.
It's inevitable. And it's inevitable from the very first day. It's because, you see, if you've seen pictures of me, right? I'm a 54-year-old man, and out of shape and with a bum left ankle. If I get into the ring with Conor McGregor, the MMA fighter, Conor McGregor could be drunk. He's still gonna kill me. Right. Of course, because he's just a better fighter. And in the case of Russia versus Ukraine, right. Russia has 5 times the soldiers. It has far more weapons of every sort, and the weapons they do have are far more sophisticated and advanced. And forget about the nuclear weapons. Right. It was inevitable from the beginning. To think otherwise is just fooling yourself.
Right. But what kind of peace deal do you see? At the end of the war?
Oh, yeah. What will happen is Medvedchuk will be installed as president of Ukraine.
If he is alive, Gonzalo, he is disappeared.
Oh, he's alive. Yeah, he escaped from house arrest. I think that the Ukrainians would probably have killed him had he remained. They whisked him away. He's probably in Russia somewhere. Because if he were dead, we'd know about it. Right. Okay, he would have come out. And so, no, my thinking is that he will be installed as president of Ukraine. But I don't think that Ukraine, quite frankly, I don't think that Ukraine, as we know it today, will survive after this war. I think it will be chopped up into pieces. I think that the piece that will be Russia's forever is Crimea. I mean, historically, Crimea is Russian, and all the people on the Crimean Peninsula are Russian. And so it's just ridiculous to say, oh, it's Ukrainian. No, it's not. It's always been Russian. The Russian Empire fought a war with the British over Crimea. It was called the Crimean War. It's theirs. And the fact that Nikita Khrushchev gave it to Ukraine in 1954 doesn't change that fact. Right. It was just an administrative give. It wasn't for real. Okay. And so anyway, my thinking at this time, and I don't think many people are thinking about this very much, but I certainly My thinking at this time is that the Russians will gain complete control of the entire country, all the way to Lviv. And the Poles lust after Lviv. They lust after it because it's a historically Polish city.
Yeah.
And there are rumors that the Poles actually want to invade Western Ukraine to grab hold of Lviv. I don't think that the Russians are going to allow this. And there are a lot of rumors that the Belarusians are about to invade Western Ukraine. Belarusians, quote unquote, it's really Russians working with the Belarusians. And so my thinking is that when this is all over, the Russians will have complete control of the entire country. And I think that they will start to dangle Lviv in front of Poland. And they will say to them, well, you want Lviv? You really want it? Well, give us something, and we'll give you what you want. Because Lviv is a historically important city for Poland.
Yeah.
Remember, the Polish nation is a parallelogram that was shifted 200 kilometers to the west. Lviv is part of Poland historically. There are Poles there, ethnic Poles. And so the Poles will want that very badly. And that will probably split the Poles off from Europe, because also Europe, the European Union, the Germans specifically, have acted very stupidly with Poland, antagonized it needlessly. Yeah. And so we might see, because of Lviv, the disintegration of Eastern European Union, i.e. Poland, breaking away from the European Union. And it would be relatively easy for them because they have their own currency. And so, we'll see what will happen, but, there's going to be a lot of flux in Europe. I think also that Eastern and Southern Ukraine, present day Eastern and Southern Ukraine, where I am, Kharkiv, Lugansk, Donetsk, Mariupol, Kherson, all the way to Odessa, I think that will eventually become a new country, a new puppet state, a small nation, and it will be called Novorossiya. I don't think that it will join Russia, or maybe it will. That's for the future, who knows? But I think that it will be separate, and that the future Ukraine will be roughly a third the size it is now, with Kiev as its capital, and it will be a demilitarized, neutral state. And I think, quite frankly, that if this is done, if this partition is carried out, and if what is today Ukraine is cut up into several pieces, in 20, 30 years, all of these pieces might be much, much better off economically, socially, culturally, in every respect. I think that it might be an actually good thing. But of course, the people today don't see that. They're not looking 20, 30, 40 years ahead. No. They're looking at the here and now, and they certainly don't want that. So there's going to be a lot of fighting. But the NATO, what it wants to do, I think that they've given up the ghost of actually engaging with Russia militarily, because I think that the NATO military commanders and the American military commanders are scared of the Russians, and with good reason. They should be, because the Russians will beat them. And what's interesting is that the Americans have done war games against the Russians, and the Russians beat them consistently in Eastern Europe every time, because they have the will. They have what it takes to win militarily, and they have the political will and the morale. And these sanctions, by the way, they only helped Putin politically at home. Yeah. Because now he's got plus 75% of the population behind him in this war. And especially as these videos are emerging of Ukro-Nazis, as they are called, beating up Roma, face painting people who are ethnically Russian, painting them green and tying them up to lampposts and beating them. They tie them up, they paint them up as green because they say that Russians are ogres, or orcs. That's what they are, which is really despicable. And just, it makes the Russians in Russia pissed off, number one, and more supportive of Putin. And in the West, they have this crazy notion that the generals in the Kremlin will overthrow Putin. That's insane. It's just insane. Yeah. It's not even stupid. It's just, are you living on this planet or an alternate reality? Okay, because it's just stupid. Okay.
And Gonzalo, what about the Ukrainian people? I really feel for them. Do they believe in all this bullshit about Zelensky being Batman, that he can win over Putin? And what are their sentiments as you see it?
Well, quite naturally, they are very, very nationalistic. And whenever your country is attacked, of course, you're going to be very nationalistic and very much opposed to the country that is invading you. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of people are very, very upset with me for airing these points of view. But I have to say what I think. I think, and as I see it, as the truth, you know. And it's not me. How can I put it? I have enormous affection for the Ukrainian people and for the Ukrainian nation. I've crossed this country multiple times on my motorcycle. I've been everywhere: Lviv, Kiev, Poltava, all these little towns all over the place. So I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, but I've gotten a good sense of it. They're lovely people. They are wonderful, wonderful people. In many ways, they are like Russians, but softer, softer and more conciliatory and more humane, perhaps, not so rigid. And so I have nothing but the difference is very much like the same between Germans and Austrians. Germans are harder. Austrians are softer. It's the same culture, but just softer, you know? Right. And it's very much like that. And
maybe like Americans and Canadians, Gonzalo.
Yeah, yes, exactly right. Exactly right, you know? And so my sense is I want to prevent needless death. That's my priority. And when you are unrealistic and you think that your side can win a war that is unwinnable for you, you carry hope in your heart, and hope is a wonderful thing, but it has to be attached to realism.
Yeah.
And I think that all the propaganda has convinced so many young people, so many young soldiers in Ukraine to pursue a course of action that will only lead to their deaths, because they have a false belief that there is a possibility of winning. And one of the hard and bitter lessons of being an adult, and I'm sure that you ladies would agree with me on this, is that you have to recognize your limits, and you have to realize when something, no matter how much you want it, it's just not possible. It's just not within the realms of the possible. And you have to accept that, and it's a bitter lesson to accept, but it's necessary in order to survive. And so it seems to me that with all this propaganda and all this nonsense of how, you know, great Zelensky, he's a cokehead, by the way, he's just addicted to cocaine, and this is for real. Zelensky is so wonderful and all this, and we're going to win and all that. And so all these young people, all these young soldiers, they're going to die for nothing. The flower of Ukrainian youth will be killed for nothing. And I can't think of a worse fate, you know? Right. And also what's happening is that so far we have something like 6 million Ukrainians have left the country. Now, these are the most educated people, because they're the ones who can afford to leave, that they have the wherewithal to leave. And one could argue very easily that maybe 30% of those people, close to 2 million Ukrainians, will never come back. And that is a loss of human capital that is irreplaceable. Yeah. And so no matter how things turn out, Ukraine will never be the same. Even if some, you know, if there was like a magician who could magically wave a wand and have the Russians completely expelled, Ukraine, as it was known, is gone forever. It will never come back, you know, and it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the Ukrainian people. And so, yeah, that's my thinking on this whole situation. And it makes me extremely sad, to tell you the truth. There's no satisfaction in seeing this destruction of this wonderful nation. But
of course not.
It seems to me that the people to blame are the Western powers. And they cynically used Ukraine and cynically goaded Ukraine into doing foolish things insofar as trying to invade the Donbass, in terms of antagonizing the Russians. It would have been so easy to have come to an agreement with the Russians that was mutually beneficial between Ukraine and Russia, to the benefit of both. And Ukraine would have continued, you know, and been a prosperous country. But the West, look, the West, there is a serious problem too. The West hates Putin because in the 90s, when Putin came to power in 99, he inherited a country that was being violated by the Western powers. They were stealing everything left, right, and center, using the corrupt oligarchs to have their way. They were just stealing it and destroying it. And what happened was that Putin through very wily means and very patiently and methodically, he expunged these Western financial rapists from Russia. And he also, and people don't seem to realize this, he also expunged the avaricious oligarchs. And there are other oligarchs now, but they are Russian oligarchs who reinvest their money in Russia. The funny thing is, all these sanctions against the Russian oligarchs like Abramovich and so forth, all these people left Russia and they are not welcome back in Russia. They are rich and they own lands and they own the factories in Russia, but they are not welcome there. Okay, because the Russian regime, the Putin regime, has been very clear of never stealing the assets of anyone. Okay, they arm twist you, but they're not going to steal your stuff because they think that setting that precedent is just a recipe for the disaster, and I would agree. But you see, in Ukraine, that avaricious financial rape that occurred in Russia was also occurring in Ukraine. And the thing is, see, it continued in Ukraine. In Ukraine, you did not have a figure like Putin who slowly and methodically ended that regime and created something that was a lot less corrupt, because Russia is far less corrupt than Ukraine. Ukraine is extremely corrupt. A lot more prosperous, because that's the situation in Russia now. It is much more prosperous. And Ukraine is per capita one of the poorest, if not now the poorest country in Europe. And you see, Ukraine is what Russia would have been had Putin not started to slowly and methodically expunge the Western, the rapacious capitalism of the West that had, had its way with Russia all during the 90s. You see? And it's that fact that Putin expunged these people that earned the hatred of these people towards him that is, psychotic at this point.
Right.
See? That's the situation we find ourselves in.
I want to end this lovely talk discussion by asking you if you have any idea, any thoughts about how long this war is going to go on.
Yeah, I hope, and I could be extremely wrong, but I hope that it's over by the end of April.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my thinking at this point. This is assuming, of course, that NATO does not interfere. Now, NATO is trying to get weapons into Ukraine to help the quote unquote resistance. And also there is the rumor, and this is a rumor, but the rumor is that Zelensky is no longer in Ukraine. He's actually in Poland. We will not know, but this is the rumor. And there are some people who have presented very compelling evidence, various photographs, and saying, oh, look, see this light switch, it's Polish, it's not Ukrainian, and such things like that, they make a compelling case. But what's the saying, for amazing claims, you must have amazing evidence, So I'll hold out that thing. But the notion that he might be in Poland, or let me phrase this, the notion that the government falls and that Zelensky flees to the West, to Poland, and they set up a government in exile, that's likely in the cards. I think that they've already created the conditions for that, the Americans. They've already created a mechanism to set up some sort of government in exile that will constantly challenge the government that the Russians will implement in Ukraine. But I don't think that as a practical matter, it will be of any importance, because, see, being there is half the battle, right? Possession is the better part of ownership, or something like that, right? And so the Russians are going to own Ukraine. They're going to win it, okay, right, one way or the other. And they're not going to allow NATO weapons into Ukraine, because the Russians are very, very good at human intelligence, and a lot of the things that have happened insofar as missile strikes at different centers of mercenary soldiers or foreign volunteers, whatever way you want to call them, and weapons depots. There was an attack, a week and a half ago, where the Sunday before last, they hit a depot just outside of Lviv. They destroyed $400 million worth of weapons in one shot. And so the Russians are very good at that. And so I don't think that realistically that much weaponry will enter Ukraine. And because of the society of Ukraine, Scott Ritter has mentioned this several times. He's an American Marine and military analyst. And he said that the social composition in Ukraine is much more cosmopolitan. And so the notion of some sort of resistance movement that will arise is much less likely, because any such resistance movement will be much easier to compromise by the Russians than, say, in more primitive societies where the fighters all are family members and have known each other for decades. And so, yeah, if such a resistance movement tries to arise in Ukraine, the Russians will be able to pierce it, to basically neutralize it from the inside, and so to compromise it, basically.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's coming out that one of the leaders of the Azov battalion was actually an FSB agent. Insane as that may sound, right? That's the word that I'm hearing now. Okay, I mean, this is fog of war, so it could be completely wrong. I'm just saying. But the Russians are very, very good at compromising, and at piercing closed circles. And so the fact that the notion that they'll be able to do it in this circumstance and any kind of resistance, I think that's highly likely. And so, what am I basically saying? I think that the Russians are going to sew up Ukraine. I mean, let's put it this way: in 6 months, this is going to be over, one way or the other. I think that the big problem that we should be paying attention to is the escalating sanctions against China. And I think that that's a good cliffhanger to leave your audience with.
Indeed.
The sanctions against China. The Americans are going to continue that. And that's going to lead to another situation like Russia, but it's going to be China. And it's going to be much more damaging to the West.
Right.
There were so many questions more that I had, but we have to stop this now. And maybe Gonzalo, we can do it again in a week or so.
Yeah, it would be lovely. It would be. I mean, if you kind ladies don't mind me ranting like a madman, sure.
Not at all. Keep ranting, Gonzalo. We love to listen. So that's not a problem. But you have to stay safe now. And I mean, I know that your situation is a little bit precarious in Kharkiv. So
it's the problem I'm having for your audience who might not know. The problem is that the Zelensky regime is lashing out at any dissidents. They've assassinated several mayors whose name I can tell you, like the mayor of Lemina, a town of 18,000, a mayor called Volodymyr Struk, Struk. He was assassinated almost at the beginning of the war. One of the negotiators that the Zelensky regime had was assassinated. MMA fighters, I mean, they even assassinated a TikToker yesterday. They had him do a video confession, then they whisked him away, and the word today is that he's dead. And so what happened was that the Zelensky regime goons seem to have taken an interest in me, and so my situation is a bit precarious here. But that's all good and fine. I'm a big boy and I can look after myself, so it's no big deal. But the situation here is very complex. Let's put it that way.
Indeed.
Before we go, I just want to tell you that Zelensky is speaking to the Swedish Parliament tomorrow.
Well, yeah. I mean, I hope that your Parliament will, tell him to take his story elsewhere, because it's just a pack of lies. Okay.
No, they won't.
It's just a complete pack of lies.
I'm sure
that's the thing.
I'm sure he'll get standing ovations like he did in Congress and everywhere else except Israel. That didn't go too well, from what I understand.
No, it didn't go too well. And what's interesting is that everybody gives him standing ovations, but they don't give him soldiers.
True.
Which is frankly the important thing.
True.
Because we don't want this to widen. That's the thing that we want to prevent at all costs. Because if it widens, then all of the West and everything that has taken centuries to build is going to be at risk. And that is something that we should never allow. That's my thinking.
Yeah,
I agree. Take care, Gonzalo, and talk to you soon again, I hope.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Maria, Ingrid, you take care. And to your audience, thank you very much for listening. And I will see you next time.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.